So we're tracking more updates from the Middle East. We're learning that Israel has destroyed another high-rise building in Gaza City. This has brought the number of buildings razed during Israel's campaign to seize the largest urban center in Gaza Strip to at least 50. Now, the Israeli military has claimed that it struck the Al Ruya Tower after issuing an evacuation threat, forcing residents and displaced families sheltering in makeshift tents in the neighborhood to flee. This comes after Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip have reportedly killed 62 people on the 7th of September. Now, among the sites hit was a school in Gaza City that had been sheltering displaced people, resulting in the deaths of 8 people, including 4 women and 4 children. Meanwhile, as Israel continues its operation in Gaza, the United Nations has stated that there is a very narrow window to prevent famine from spreading further in Gaza. The UN has called on Israel to allow unimpeded aid delivery in the territory where it is fighting Hamas. With us on the broadcast is Mohammed Osman. Thank you, sir, for staying put. The latest updates coming in regarding what exactly is transpiring. The UN once again issuing a warning as far as the aid situation, the dire situation in Gaza is currently concerned. They've stated that there's a very narrow window at this point to prevent a full-fledged famine from spreading even further in the Gaza Strip. What really is needed at this time? The United States, as we've discussed before, has been making statements regarding a ceasefire deal, but the humanitarian situation on the ground is even more dire. Is it time for Trump to exert some pressure on Netanyahu to ensure that humanitarian aid is delivered to the people who are practically starving on the ground?
Yes, if President Trump and the United States seek whatever little to preserve whatever little amount of credibility they still retain in the Middle East, if any, they have to exert more pressure on Israel, because the stakeholder or the party that needs to be pressured is Israel, and not Hamas or any of the other Palestinian factions in the Gaza Strip. Israel is the stronger power. Israel is the one moving events on the ground, and Israel is definitely the one causing this dire humanitarian crisis the United Nations was just discussing. Over 63,000 people, 80% of them civilians, have died in the past 23 months. Over 90% of the 2 million residents of Gaza are internally displaced. 80% of the Gaza Strip's basic infrastructure and housing units have been wiped out. The majority of hospitals have been wiped out. There is no electricity in most areas. There is no water. And in the midst of all of this suffering, Israel is impeding the entry of humanitarian aid, letting in only a very small fraction of the needed amounts of humanitarian aid to keep the Gaza Strip alive. And that's why we are on the verge of an all-out famine. And some parts of the Gaza Strip are actually experiencing famine at this point. Like the recent genocide scholars, when they came to the conclusion that Israel is committing genocide, this was not based on some political bias or some anti-Israeli sentiment those people have. If any, some of those people were very pro-Israel historically, yet they could not deny that the facts on the ground, that Israel is actively carrying out an operation on the ground to destroy and eliminate all means of life in the Gaza Strip, with the purpose and aim of forcefully displacing the Palestinians out of their lands. And many countries oppose this. Egypt, of course, is the main impediment before the forced displacement and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip, because they are preventing that from happening. Egypt is refusing to open its border. However, this is not preventing Israel from attempting to find other means to deport the Palestinians. And this is something that the Israelis and the Americans as well have been openly talking about and propagating, that the Palestinians are entitled to the right of voluntary departure, which is basically a cover for forced displacement. So we are in a very dire condition, Peya, and I think that it's a moral obligation upon the United States to impose actual pressure on Israel so that a ceasefire can be reached and a settlement can be reached in accordance with international law.
Indeed, so one final question. The UNGA session is coming up later this month. We've seen countries such as France, Belgium and Australia as well stating that they will be supporting a resolution for the recognition of Palestine. How far do you think will this help the Palestinian cause? And do you really think that this will lead to any tangible change on the ground, since we do know that it is the UNSC that has the final say in which the United States has veto power?
To be completely honest with you, this will be a moral victory for the pro-Palestine camp and for the defenders of Palestinian rights. However, it will not go beyond that. It will not cause any tangible changes on the ground because it will not affect how Israel conducts itself in the battlefield or in the occupied territories in the West Bank as well. The problem is Israel can evade the consequences of its systemic violations of international law thanks to the unconditional support and political cover provided by the United States. So this conference coming up during the UNGA summit that is supposed to garner more recognition for the state of Palestine and to push forward for the state solution, which is basically sponsored this conference by France and Saudi Arabia, it will not cause this tangible change on the ground. And the United States is actively trying to obstruct this conference, as you very well know, Pia. The United States has denied the Palestinian delegation, even though Palestine is an observer state in the United Nations. Yet the Palestinian delegation, headed by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and other members of the Palestinian Authority, ministers and diplomats and others, have been denied entry visas to the United States so that they can be prevented from attending this key UN conference. And of course, this comes in violation of a treaty between the United Nations and the United States that regulate the affairs of the headquarters of the UN in New York. So as you can see, the United States is willing to undermine its own diplomatic and legal obligations and also completely violate international law for the sake of Israel's interest. So that's why I'm very pessimistic about the whole ordeal, Pia.
All right, Mr. Osman, with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, providing